There's a board game out there called chess and it's quite popular. You might have played it yourself even. Not to mention the competitive scene is huge, with many people making a career out of playing and analyzing the game. But in the midst of all this study and analysis, did they ever stop to consider if the game was actually good? Wouldn't it be a shame if all the chess masters in the world did all this work for nothing? Well, like it or not, I've decided to find out. Join me as I endeavor to answer the question, is chess even good? So let's take it step by step. Much like how you eat with your eyes first, a gamer games with their eyes first. So how do the graphics hold up? In 2012, YouTube user Fitzthistlewits made a review, and this is what he had to say. The graphics are terrible. And then later, what kind of wacky tobacco were they smoking when they came up with this shit? Now granted, this review was 8 years ago, so maybe some things have changed. Who am I kidding? Nothing's changed at all. The knights are still just horses, the bishops don't look like bishops whatsoever, and the rooks still move by telekinetic force. Given that this has been a flaw in the game for 8 years now, the lack of a graphical update is quite inexcusable. If you just, I don't know, added some more skins, or like, a voice line or two, it could really breathe some new life into the game, I think. But that's enough about graphics. Not every game has to be a graphical masterpiece to survive and thrive. Let's move on and examine the game's story. If you don't want the plot of chess spoiled for you, please proceed to the timestamp on screen. Okay, so in chess, there's two armies, black and white, that are trying to kill each other. They do this by maneuvering the enemy king into a position where he can't escape attack, also called a checkmate. Since you can play whichever faction you want, the game has an ending for both armies when they win, and it's unclear which ending is canonical. There's also a bunch of neutral endings, such as the stalemate, the 50-move rule, the threefold repetition, or also you can even just mutually give up and, I guess, frolic with each other until the end of time. But that's all they really give you. There's a lot of questions left unanswered, like why can a member of the religious order go toe-to-toe with a trained mounted combatant? And also, why are the two armies fighting in the first place? My favorite mysterious feature is the two armies have the exact same characters, which is, again, just left completely unexplained. This must be a nod to the 2007 Valve classic, Team Fortress 2, which also pits a roster of characters against themselves. The finer details of the plot and the world are left to the player to imagine, which certainly works for some. If you dislike long-winded, over-involved narratives, this game's story will do you just fine. We've mentioned some of the game's characters throughout the video, but now it's time to examine the roster thoroughly. The king is the protagonist by default, because if you lose him, you're dead. That means he's a badass with super special powers, right? Wrong. The king's one fancy move is the switcheroo fusion dance he does with his rooks. Apart from that, he can move one measly square in any direction. The king's playbook is to hide in his little bunker until it's safe. He only comes out when everyone's done killing each other and most of the things that threaten him are gone, like a true coward. Compare this to the queen, whose role in the story is being the king's hyper-competent robot anime girlfriend. She can move any number of squares in whichever direction she likes, making her the strongest character in the game. The writers went for the tried and tested approach of giving the woman crazy good fighting skills instead of a personality and calling her a strong female character, but it's still better than Lord Chicken Shit over here. Next there's the rook, who moves any number of squares vertically or horizontally. That's actually all I can say for sure about it, which honestly terrifies me. It does appear to be an autonomous moving tower, but the devs refuse to make a definitive statement, so we're just gonna have to live in fear forever. So how about them bishops, eh? They move any number of squares diagonally. I can only assume that this is where the inspiration for D&D clerics came from. It's considered weaker than a rook, which reinforces that even the fear of God can't overcome the fear of the unknown. Then we have knights. They move in this confusing L shape which scientists are still struggling to understand. The knight can jump over other pieces to land on its prey, paving the way for that murderous fucking lamp from the Pixar logo. It's clear that the pawn was originally intended to be the protagonist for chess, but it was replaced by the king for unknown reasons. Its movement is more complex than that of any other character. It moves one square forward but captures one square diagonally in front, except for its first move where it can move 2 squares forward. There's also one situation in which it can take a piece without even going onto its square, which is really badass. Also, when it reaches the other side of the map, it can become any character it wants except the king. The pawn has a diverse, interesting moveset and a character arc highlighting a very human struggle to pursue your dreams to become what you want to be. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the best character in chess. Let's move on to the game's soundtrack. So that's all my points covered, but I have one last treat for you before the final verdict. I mentioned several times how the devs have pretty much been silent since the game came out, but I was able to pull some strings and get an interview, so here it is. Hi, pleasure to have you. So, why haven't you been updating the game? Um, so how about those rooks, eh? Okay, bye. So once again, thanks to the devs for letting me interview them and shedding some light on the situation. We all learned a lot. So now it's time for the final verdict. Is chess even good? Yeah, if you're a fucking nerd.